The acrid smell of fuel exhaust mixed with the peculiar musk of a dozen alien species filled the air of Red Spire Station. Commander Vi pressed her fingers against the data crystal secured to her chest harness, its blue glow pulsing faintly through the fabric. The rhythmic thrum of the station's artificial gravity generators created a subtle vibration beneath her feet as she navigated through the crowded thoroughfare. Red Spire was a mess of contradictions, gleaming chrome corridors leading to grimy marketplaces, elegant diplomatic lounges adjacent to seedy cantinas, where mercenaries and traders conducted business in hushed tones. Today marked the opening of a new commercial route, and the station buzzed with unprecedented activity. Merchants hawked exotic goods from distant worlds, while travelers from every corner of the galaxy rushed to catch connecting flights. Vi's violet skin caught the harsh overhead lighting as she moved purposefully through the main concourse. Her commander's insignia, 3 intersecting silver spirals, identified her as high-ranking Azuran military to those who knew to look. Most didn't. To them, she was just another tall, blue-skinned humanoid in a sea of diversity. The data crystal contained intelligence so sensitive that the Azuran High Council had deemed it necessary to transport it personally rather than risk digital transmission. Vi had volunteered for the mission partly out of duty, mostly out of ambition. Successfully delivering this information to the Coalition Council on Zerion Prime would cement her position for decades to come. She paused at a food vendor, scanning the crowd with practiced eyes. The briefing had warned of potential interference from rival factions, though the Azuran intelligence network was supposedly uncompromised. Still, paranoia was a useful survival trait in her line of work. That's when the screaming started. A blur of midnight black fur and gleaming teeth exploded from the direction of the cargo bay. The Razor Fang, a predator from the death worlds of the Outer Rim, moved with liquid grace despite its massive frame. 8 feet of pure killing machine, all muscle and fang and claw, it had somehow escaped containment. Panic erupted instantly. Beings scattered in every direction, abandoning belongings and knocking over vendor stalls in their desperate flight. Vi's hand moved instinctively to her plasma sidearm, but she knew it would be useless against a creature that size. Razor Fangs had been known to shrug off military-grade weapons. The predator landed on the food vendor's counter with a sound like breaking bones. Its 6 eyes, arranged in pairs down its elongated skull, fixed on a group of terrified Kalathi younglings, huddled against a support beam. Saliva, thick as syrup, and twice as toxic, dripped from its meter-long fangs. Then he appeared. A human, shorter than her, by a full head, wearing simple work clothes that had seen better days, stepped directly into the creature's path. His brown hair was streaked with premature gray, and his hands hung loose at his sides. Vi wanted to shout a warning to tell him to run, but the words died in her throat as she saw his eyes. They were the coldest blue she'd ever seen, calculating and utterly without fear. The Razor Fang noticed him immediately, its coiled muscles bunching for a lethal pounce. But the human was already moving. What happened next violated everything Vi thought she knew about biology and physics. The human's hands shot out, catching the creature by its neck and underjaw as it launched itself forward. Instead of being bowled over or torn apart, he pivoted on one foot, using the beast's own momentum against it. The sound of tearing flesh filled the air as the human's grip tightened. His fingers, just fingers, no weapons, no enhancement harnesses, sank into the creature's hide as if it were paper. The Razor Fang's roar of aggression became a gurgle of confusion and pain. Vi watched in stunned silence as the human literally ripped the predator's head from its body. The massive torso fell to the deck with a wet thud, black blood spreading in an ever-widening pool. The human stood there for a moment, holding the severed head, before casually tossing it aside. The entire attack had lasted perhaps 3 seconds. The station fell into absolute silence, except for the distant hum of life support systems. Even the security forces who'd finally arrived stood frozen, their weapons lowered in bewilderment. The human wiped his hands on his work clothes and looked directly at Vi. Sorry about the mess, he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. Name's Wyatt. Vi realized she was staring. More than that, she was studying him with the same intensity she'd used to evaluate a new weapon system. This person had just destroyed an apex predator with his bare hands. Everything she'd been taught about human limitations, about the careful balance of power in the galaxy, suddenly felt questionable. Commander Vi, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Azuran Deep Fleet. Wyatt nodded, seeming unsurprised by her rank. Heard about the new trade route. Figured there'd be some interesting folks passing through. He glanced at the data crystal's faint glow through her harness. Looks like I was right. Before Vi could respond, the station's PA system crackled to life. All passengers for the Zarian Express prepare for immediate departure. Boarding has been moved up due to security concerns. Vi's blood went cold. The passenger manifest was classified, the departure time even more so. Someone was forcing her hand. She made a decision that would have horrified her superiors. Mr. Wyatt, are you available for employment? His eyebrows rose slightly. Depends on the job. I need to get to Zarian Prime. I also need to ensure I arrive alive. She gestured toward the Razorfang's corpse. Your qualifications speak for themselves. For a long moment, Wyatt studied her with those unsettling blue eyes. Then he smiled, and Vi caught a glimpse of something predatory in the expression. Not cruel, just utterly confident in his own capabilities. Lady, you've got yourself a bodyguard. The journey to Zarian Prime should have taken 6 standard days aboard the passenger liner Swift Passage. Should have being the operative phrase. They were barely 2 days out when the first attempt came. Vi had been reviewing intelligence reports in her cabin when the ship's lights flickered. Once, twice, then steady again. Wyatt, who'd been cleaning his fingernails with a combat knife that seemed too large for practical use, looked up sharply. EMP burst, he said matter-of-factly. Small one, meant to disable sensors and communications without frying the life support. Before Vi could ask how he knew, the ship shuddered. Not the gentle vibration of course corrections, but the violent jolt of weapons fire. Pirates, she asked, her hand moving to her sidearm. Worse. Wyatt was already moving toward the door. Professionals. The corridor outside erupted into chaos. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the sound of running feet mixed with shouting voices in a dozen languages. Vi followed Wyatt toward the bridge, noting how other passengers seemed to instinctively give him space. They could sense it too, that aura of barely contained lethality. The ship's captain, a nervous Danubian with twitching antennae, was barking orders when they arrived. Don't know how they got past the outer perimeter. The defense grid should have... Captain Vi interrupted, flashing her military credentials. Status report. 3 ships, unknown configuration. They've disabled our engines and are demanding surrender. The attackers claim to have authority from the Azuran Trade Commission to search all vessels. Vi felt her blood turn to ice. The Trade Commission was controlled by the industrial caste, her primary political rivals. If they'd learned about the data crystal... Commander, Wyatt said quietly, we need to leave now. She was about to ask how when explosions rocked the ship. The main display showed boarding pods latching onto the hull like metallic leeches. Vi counted 6 pods each, carrying at least a dozen armed mercenaries. The escape pods, she suggested. Wyatt shook his head. They'll pick us off before we clear the debris field. He pointed to a secondary display showing the ship's layout. Cargo Bay 3. There's a maintenance shuttle there, pre-flight capable. How could you possibly know that... His smile was sharp enough to cut. I make it my business to know things. Getting to Cargo Bay 3 meant traversing half the ship while avoiding the mercenaries, systematically sweeping each deck. Vi had done her share of covert operations, but watching Wyatt move through the ship was like attending a masterclass in predatory behavior. He didn't skulk or hide. Instead, he flowed through the shadows with an economy of motion that spoke of extensive training. When they encountered 2 mercenaries guarding a junction, Wyatt simply walked up to them and spoke. Vi couldn't hear the conversation from her position, but both guards relaxed visibly. Then, Wyatt's hands moved, and the guards dropped to the deck without a sound. "What did you tell them?" she whispered, as they stepped over the bodies. That they'd won the lottery. Wyatt's expression was unreadable. Technically true. They got to keep breathing for an extra 30 seconds. The maintenance shuttle was exactly where he'd said it would be. As they strapped in, Vi's mind raced with questions about her enigmatic bodyguard. How had he known about the ship's layout? How had he moved through the corridors with such confidence? And how in all the hells had he taken down 2 armed mercenaries with his bare hands? The shuttle's engines fired, just as the cargo bay doors began to seal. Wyatt's piloting was every bit as precise as his combat skills, threading them through the closing gap with centimeters to spare. "Where to?" he asked, hands dancing over the navigation controls. "Colaris." Vi replied, consulting her mission protocols. "There's a Coalition way station there. We can requisition a proper escort." Wyatt's expression darkened. "Colaris. That's spider tick territory. The whole system's crawling with things that eat starships for breakfast. Do you have a better suggestion?" He was quiet for a moment, then shrugged. "Colaris it is. Just promise me you've got good life insurance." The journey to Colaris took 4 days, during which Vi learned exactly nothing more about her protector, despite her best efforts. He deflected personal questions with the skill of a trained diplomat, spoke at least 6 languages fluently, and demonstrated an encyclopedic knowledge of galactic military history. When she asked about his background, he simply said he was formerly military, and left it at that. What disturbed her most wasn't his mysterious past. It was how comfortable she felt in his presence. She'd been raised to believe in Azuran superiority, in the inherent differences that made her people the natural leaders of any coalition. Yet, here was a human who moved like liquid death, thought 3 steps ahead of everyone else, and treated her as an equal worthy of protection. Colaris was a jungle world, its surface covered in dense green growth that stretched from pole to pole. The Coalition way station was little more than a landing pad and communications array carved out of the forest canopy. When they set down, the humidity hit them like a physical blow. "Charming," Wyatt muttered, surveying the steaming jungle that pressed in on all sides. Nothing could possibly go wrong here. He was right to be concerned. The way station's staff of 3 seemed jumpy, constantly glancing at the tree line, as if expecting attack. The station commander, a grizzled Proximan veteran, was less than encouraging. "Haven't had a supply run in 2 weeks," he explained, leading them through the cramped facility. "Something's got the wildlife stirred up. Bigger things coming closer to the station than they should." "Define bigger things," Vi requested. "Razor fangs," the commander replied grimly. "A whole pack of them. They've killed 2 scout teams already." Vi felt Wyatt tense beside her. "How many in the pack?" "Last count put it at 7 adults, maybe 3 juveniles." The commander's expression grew even grimmer. "And, before you ask, yes, we've tried calling for evacuation. Something's jamming our long-range communications." They were given quarters in the station's central building, 2 small rooms connected by a common area. Vi was reviewing her options when she heard voices from outside. Peering through the reinforced window, she saw Wyatt talking quietly with one of the station technicians. Money changed hands, and the technician handed over what looked like a military-grade sensor array. 20 minutes later, Wyatt knocked on her door. "Good news and bad news," he announced. "Good news, I know where the pack is denning. Bad news, they're between us and the only ship capable of reaching Zarian Prime." Vi studied the tactical display he'd somehow acquired. The Razor Fang pack had taken up residence in a ruined research facility about 3 kilometers from the landing pad. The only ship with sufficient range and stealth capabilities to reach Coalition space was parked at a secondary pad on the facility's far side. "So we go around them," she suggested. Wyatt shook his head. "Too much distance through hostile territory. Colaris has things worse than razor fangs, and they hunt in the deep forest. He pointed to a route on the display. Our best bet is straight through, fast and quiet. Through a pack of razor fangs. Are you insane? His smile was utterly confident and completely terrifying. Probably. But I've done stupider things and lived to tell about it. They left at dawn, moving through the forest with painful care. Wyatt led somehow, finding paths through the dense undergrowth that seemed invisible to Vi's eyes. The jungle was alive with sound, chirping, buzzing, and calling from unseen creatures, but he navigated by instinct more than sight. 2 hours in, they encountered their first problem. A river, swift and deep, blocked their path. The nearest bridge was marked on the map as destroyed. We swim for it, Wyatt decided. Vi stared at the dark water with distrust. What about river predators? There are always river predators. He was already stripping off his outer gear. The trick is not to look like prey. The crossing was nightmarish. Something large and hungry brushed past Vi's legs halfway across, but Wyatt's presence in the water seemed to discourage further investigation. They pulled themselves onto the far bank, soaked, exhausted, and considerably more alert. The ruins appeared just before noon, a sprawling complex of prefab buildings, slowly being consumed by the jungle. What had once been neat pathways were now overgrown with vines and broad-leafed plants that released clouds of phosphorescent spores when disturbed. Research facility, Wyatt murmured, studying the layout. Xenobiology department from the look of the equipment. Wonder what they were studying out here. They had their answer soon enough. The first razorfang corpse lay just inside the complex's perimeter. It had been partially eaten, but what remained showed dozens of precisely placed wounds. Whatever had killed it possessed both intelligence and considerable skill. The researchers, Vi whispered. They were experimenting on them. More than that, Wyatt knelt beside the carcass, examining the wounds. Someone was training them. Look at these cut patterns, surgical precision. You don't get that with standard weapons. They pressed deeper into the complex, finding more evidence of systematic experimentation. Containment cells designed for the razorfang's medical equipment, calibrated for their physiology, and dozens of research notes in various languages scattered throughout the buildings. It was in the central laboratory that they found the first live specimen. The adult male was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, 12 feet of corded muscle and predatory intelligence. It had been sedated, but was beginning to stir massive head-lifting as they approached. Its 6 eyes focused on them with unmistakable hunger. We need to move, Wyatt said, but Vi was already studying the containment system. The holding cells, she realized. They're all keyed to the same control system. Someone's been letting them out selectively. Before Wyatt could respond, the laboratory's main door hissed open. 3 figures in combat armor strode in, weapons trained on them. Azuran armor, Vi noted with a sick feeling. Commander Vi, the lead figure, said, removing her helmet to reveal the hard features of Colonel Diane Kaur. The industrial caste has been looking forward to speaking with you. Vi's hand moved toward her weapon but froze as the razorfang's eyes snapped fully open. The sedation was wearing off faster than expected. Colonel, she said carefully, this isn't exactly the ideal location for a conversation. On the contrary, Colonel Kaur replied, gesturing to her companions to spread out. It's perfect, remote isolated, and when we're done here, the local wildlife will dispose of any inconvenient evidence. Wyatt had gone very still beside Vi. Not the stillness of fear, but the coiled tension of a predator preparing to strike. How many more of your people are in the facility? Colonel Kaur smiled coldly. Enough. We've been tracking you since Red Spire. Did you really think you could simply disappear? The data crystal contains information that belongs to the Azuran people, not the Coalition Council. That's for the High Council to decide, Vi protested. The High Council, Colonel Kaur spat, is politically compromised. They've lost sight of what's best for our species. She nodded to one of her men. Take the crystal. Kill them both, then release the specimens. Make it look like an accident. The soldier stepped forward, weapon raised. That's when Wyatt moved. The human blur that had impressed Vi at Red Spire Station was nothing compared to what she witnessed now. Wyatt erupted into motion with inhuman speed, his body moving in ways that defied ordinary physics. The first soldier's rifle was crushed in Wyatt's grip before he could pull the trigger. The second managed to get off a shot that Wyatt simply wasn't there for. Colonel Kaur shouted orders, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Wyatt moved through the three Azurans like a force of nature, deadly and inexorable. When the violence ended barely 5 seconds later, all three lay motionless on the laboratory floor. But the sound of weapons fire had awakened things that were better left sleeping. The roar that echoed through the facility came from a dozen throats. Every razor fang in the complex was now awake, alert, and very, very angry. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red, and somewhere in the distance Vi could hear the sound of metal being torn apart. "The containment system," Wyatt said, checking Colonel Kaur's body for useful equipment. "They've been released." Vi's blood ran cold. "All of them. Every last one." Wyatt straightened, a grim smile playing at his lips. "And they sound hungry." The first razor fang burst through the laboratory's main entrance, like a living shadow. This one was larger than the specimen at Red Spire, a female judging by the bone ridges along her skull, and absolutely enraged. Her 6 eyes fixed on them with predatory intensity. Vi raised her plasma rifle, but Wyatt caught her arm. "Save your ammunition. You'll need it for the others." Others. Plural. Vi could hear them now, the sound of claws on metal growing louder. How many had the researchers been keeping here? The female coiled the spring muscles bunching visibly beneath her midnight hide. Wyatt stepped forward, placing himself between Vi and the predator. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "No matter what you see, stay behind me." The razor fang launched itself forward with lethal grace. Wyatt didn't dodge or retreat. Instead, he met the creature head-on, his hands shooting out to catch it by the throat. The impact should have driven them both to the ground. Instead, Wyatt held firm, his feet planted like tree roots. What happened next stripped away every assumption Vi had ever made about human limitations. Wyatt's grip tightened, and she could hear the creature's bones starting to crack. The razor fang thrashed wildly, its claws raking along Wyatt's arms and chest, but the wounds closed almost as quickly as they opened. When the predator tried to bite, Wyatt simply squeezed harder, and its jaw went slack. Then he twisted his hands, and the razor fang's neck snapped with a sound like breaking timber. He dropped the corpse and turned to Vi, blood still oozing from the rapidly healing claw marks on his exposed skin. "We need to reach the ship. Now." They ran through the facility's corridors as the sounds of razor fangs grew louder around them. Vi counted at least 6 distinct roars, possibly more. The creatures had spread throughout the complex, searching systematically for the source of the disturbance. They emerged into the facility's central courtyard, just as 3 more razor fangs converged from different directions. These were juveniles, smaller, but faster than the adults, their movements liquid and eerily synchronized. Wyatt didn't slow down. He met the first juvenile head-on, catching it by the skull and slamming it face first into the ferrocrete ground, with enough force to leave a crater. The second tried to flank him, but found itself seized by the tail and whipped into the third, with bone-crushing force. Vi stared in fascination and horror as Wyatt methodically dismantled apex predators with his bare hands. Each movement was precisely calculated, each strike delivered with overwhelming force. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, just efficient, brutal lethality. The ship was visible now, a sleek courier vessel parked at the edge of the facility. But between them and safety stood the largest razor fang Vi had ever seen, the Pax alpha male. This creature was nearly 15 feet from nose to tail, its hide scarred from decades of battles. When it roared, the sound shattered nearby windows. "Big fellow," Wyatt observed with apparent calm. "Must be the breeding male." The alpha rushed forward with surprising speed for something so massive. Wyatt met its charge, but this time the impact sent both of them tumbling across the courtyard. They rolled, and separated the razor fang, immediately coiling for another attack. What followed was less a fight than a demonstration of applied physics. Wyatt moved around the creature like a dancer, always just out of reach of its strikes, always finding vulnerable spots to exploit. When the alpha tried to pin him with its claws, Wyatt grabbed the creature's forepaws and twisted until they snapped. The ending came suddenly. The alpha, frustrated and now partially crippled, made one final desperate lunge. Wyatt caught it in midair, his hands finding purchase on either side of the creature's skull. Then he pulled, and the razor fang simply came apart. Vi watched in stunned silence as Wyatt literally tore the apex predator in half. Blood, dark alien blood, splattered across the courtyard as the two halves of the creature hit the ground with wet thuds. Wyatt stood there for a moment, breathing hard, covered in gore from head to toe. Then he looked at Vi and shrugged. "Sorry," he said. "That got a bit messy." The courier ship's engines were still warm when they boarded. Wyatt piloted them out of Caleris space with the same casual expertise he'd shown in everything else, while Vi sat in the co-pilot's seat, trying to process what she'd witnessed. "You're not entirely human," she said finally. It wasn't a question. Wyatt glanced at her sideways. "What gave it away?" "The part where you tore a 15-foot apex predator in half with your bare hands might have been a clue." He smiled at that, a genuine expression, free of the predatory edge she'd grown accustomed to. "Enhanced. Military program. Classified beyond your security clearance, I'm afraid." "Enhanced how?" "Genetic modifications, nanotech augmentation, psychological conditioning." He made a coarse correction, fingers dancing over the controls. "Standard super soldier package plus a few experimental additions." Vi felt something click into place. "You're not a mercenary at all, are you?" "Technically, I'm retired." His expression grew serious. "But when certain intelligence services learned that an Azuran commander was transporting highly classified data through contested space, they thought it might be worth keeping an eye on things." "You've been following me since Red Spire?" "Since before Red Spire. The moment you accepted this mission, certain people took an interest." He glanced at the data crystal, still secured to her harness. "What's in there that's worth all this trouble?" Vi hesitated, then made a decision that would have horrified her 6 days ago. She detached the crystal and handed it to Wyatt. "See for yourself." Wyatt plugged the crystal into the ship's computer and whistled softly as the data scrolled across the displays. "Well, I'll be damned. Industrial caste communications with the hegemony. Financial records showing payoffs to coalition officials and—" His expression darkened. "Coordinates for human colonies in the Outer Rim. The industrial caste has been secretly negotiating with our enemies," Vi explained. "They're planning to sell out human colonial positions in exchange for exclusive trading rights. The Coalition Council needs to know." "And your own government—" Vi's laugh was bitter. "Split down factional lines. Half want to maintain the alliance with humanity. Half want to exploit the power vacuum if humanity falls to the hegemony. I volunteered for this mission because I believe cooperation is our best chance for survival." Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, studying the data. Then he looked at her with those cold blue eyes. "Tell me something, Commander. What do you think of humans now, after seeing what I can do?" It was a loaded question, and they both knew it. Vi chose her words carefully. "I think I've been guilty of applying individual limitations to an entire species," she admitted. "I thought humans were physically inferior, technologically dependent, politically naive." She gestured toward the displays, showing the destroyed razor fangs. "I was wrong on all counts." "Fear us now." "I respect you," she corrected. "There's a difference." Something shifted in Wyatt's expression, a wall coming down perhaps. "The enhancement program I went through," he said slowly. "It was designed to create soldiers capable of fighting things like the hegemony. Beings that consider humans nothing more than cattle to be harvested." "How many others like you are there?" "Not many. The process has a high failure rate." His smile was sharp again. But those of us who survive tend to be very good at our jobs. The journey to Zarian Prime took another 4 days. During that time, Vi found herself reassessing not just her opinion of humans, but her own species' place in the galactic community. The Azurans had always prided themselves on being natural leaders, superior in intellect and culture. But watching Wyatt casually tear apart creatures that would have required an entire squad of Azuran soldiers to subdue had shattered those comfortable assumptions. On the final day, as Zarian Prime grew large in the viewports, Wyatt made an unexpected offer. "When this is over," he said, "when you've delivered the data and saved human colonies you've never seen, what then?" Vi considered the question. "I suppose I'll be reassigned. Another mission, another crisis to manage." "How about a different kind of assignment?" Wyatt leaned back in his chair, studying her. "The enhancement program is always looking for suitable candidates, not necessarily humans." The implications hit her immediately. "You're offering to make me like you." "I'm offering to give you the tools to protect what you believe in more effectively." His expression grew serious. "The galaxy's changing, Vi. The old alliances aren't going to be enough. We need people who can bridge the gaps between species, who can fight the same fights on equal terms." Vi felt her pulse quicken. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. To possess that level of physical capability, that enhanced perception and reaction time. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. "Take all the time you need," Wyatt smiled. "But know this, whatever you decide, you'll always have an ally in me." The Coalition Council received Vi's data with appropriate gravity. Emergency sessions were called, fleets were redirected, and the human colonies were warned in time to repel the hegemony advance. The industrial caste's treachery was exposed, their power broken in a single devastating political maneuver. Vi stood on the observation deck of the Coalition headquarters, watching as human and Azuran ships performed joint maneuvers in the distance. The sight would have been unthinkable a week ago, species working together as equals, not one dominant culture imposing its will on others. "Penny, for your thoughts." She turned to find Wyatt approaching, no longer wearing his blood-stained work clothes. The formal uniform of the Human Special Operations Division looked good on him. "Wondering about the future," she admitted. "My people, your people working together. It feels possible now. Because you've seen what we can do." "Because I've seen what we can do." She gestured toward the ships outside. "Separately, we're limited by our own assumptions and prejudices. Together we can tear apex predators apart with our bare hands." Vi laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. "Something like that." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the joint fleet maneuvers. Finally, Wyatt spoke again. "Have you made a decision about my offer?" Vi touched the place where the data crystal had been secured, remembering the weight of responsibility it had represented. Now, that weight had been lifted, but a new one had taken its place. The responsibility to help build a galaxy where species like hers and Wyatt's could work together as equals. "Yes," she said, "I have." Wyatt raised an eyebrow, and Vi's smile held all the predatory confidence she'd learned from watching him. "When do we start?" The enhancement process was unlike anything Vi had imagined. 3 months of genetic restructuring, neural rewiring, and psychological conditioning that pushed every limit of Azuran physiology. When she emerged from the final treatment chamber, she could feel the difference immediately. Every sense heightened, every muscle fiber humming with potential energy. The first test came sooner than expected. A distress call from a mining facility in the Kuiper system, where something had slaughtered an entire security company. Local authorities were baffled the wounds didn't match any known weapons, and there were signs of incredible strength being used against armored vehicles. Vi and Wyatt took the assignment together. The mining facility was a horror show. Whatever had attacked the place had torn through reinforced barriers like tissue paper. Bodies were scattered throughout the complex, some bearing wounds that looked disturbingly familiar. Razor fangs, Vi identified, studying the claw marks in the metal walls. But this far from their natural habitat. "Someone's been transporting them," Wyatt confirmed, examining scratches on an overturned transport. Military-grade containment systems, probably. Question is who and why. They found their answer in the facility's lower levels. A secret laboratory hidden beneath the legitimate mining operation. And in that laboratory, rows of containment pods, most empty, a few still occupied. Weapons research, Vi realized, reading the scattered data files. Someone's been trying to weaponize them, create controllable predators for military use. The hegemony, Wyatt suggested. Worse. Vi's expression was grim as she recognized certain signatures in the data. Azuran industrial caste, the ones who escaped prosecution. A roar echoed through the facility, deep, resonant, and very close. But this roar was different from the ones Vi remembered. Mechanical undertones suggested artificial enhancement. "How many do you think they created?" Wyatt asked, checking his weapons. Vi consulted the laboratory records. 7 confirmed successful modifications, all released when the facility was attacked. Perfect, a lucky number. They found the first cybernetically enhanced Razorfang in the main processing center. The creature was magnificent in its lethality, the natural predator improved with mechanical augmentation. Titanium alloy claws, sensor-enhanced eyes, and what looked like some kind of energy discharge system along its spine. It saw them immediately and charged without hesitation. Vi met it head-on, her enhanced muscles and reflexes, allowing her to match the creature's speed. When its claws came down, she caught them, feeling the sharp titanium edges bite into her reinforced skin. Then she squeezed, and the metal began to crumple. The Razorfang's eyes widened in what might have been surprise. Then Vi twisted its forearms until the joints snapped, and the creature fell backward with a mechanical scream. "Not bad," Wyatt observed, as Vi finished the thing off with a precise neck strike. "But there are 6 more, and they'll be learning from this one's mistakes." He was right. The enhanced predators were smart enough to coordinate their attacks, herding Vi and Wyatt into increasingly dangerous situations. The second one they encountered tried to use the facility's industrial equipment as weapons, hurling manufacturing robots with enough force to dent steel bulkheads. Vi found herself enjoying the challenge. Her body moved with fluid grace, every motion perfectly calculated. When a cyberfang tried to surprise her from above, she caught it in mid-leap and used its own momentum to hurl it into its companion. The final confrontation came in the facility's central hub. 4 cyberfangs working in perfect coordination, their mechanical enhancements, allowing them to communicate through digital signals. They moved like a single organism, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. It should have been impossible odds. Instead, Vi felt a savage joy as she and Wyatt moved back to back, each covering the other's blind spots. Together, they were unstoppable, a perfect fusion of human enhancement technology and Azuran tactical innovation. When the last cyberfang fell, its artificial systems sparking and dying. Vi looked at her hands in wonder. They were unmarked, despite the violence, her enhanced physiology already healing the minor wounds from titanium claws. "How do you feel?" Wyatt asked, wiping mechanical lubricants from his armor. "Powerful," Vi admitted. "Like I could take on the universe." "Good, because from the looks of these files, the universe is going to need us. They've been partners ever since, ranging across the galaxy, wherever enhanced soldiers are needed. Human and Azuran working together as equals, tearing apart whatever threatens the fragile peace between species." Sometimes, Vi thinks back to that day at Red Spire Station when she first watched a human rip an apex predator into chunks like nothing. She'd been horrified then, and fascinated, and perhaps a little afraid. Now, when she tears through enemy forces with the same casual efficiency, she understands. It's not about being human, or Azuran, or any other species. It's about choosing to be more than what biology handed you. It's about protecting what matters, regardless of the cost. And sometimes late at night when they're traveling between missions, she'll catch Wyatt watching her with those cold blue eyes. They hold a warmth now that wasn't there before, the warmth of trust, of partnership, of 2 predators who found their perfect hunting companion. The galaxy is vast and full of dangers, but it's also full of possibilities for those brave enough to seize them. Vi learned that lesson watching Wyatt destroy a razorfang with his bare hands. Now, as she uses her own enhanced strength to protect innocent beings across known space, she understands the deeper truth. Species boundaries matter less than shared values. Physical differences are irrelevant compared to strength of purpose. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most beautiful thing in the universe is watching someone you respect tear an apex predator into chunks like nothing. Because in that moment you learn what true partnership looks like.